So to a lot of people, gamification when it comes to training and working out means training like an RPG, which is something I've talked about before but in a different context. You'll have like a fake avatar in an app or maybe a journal, and as you train you'll level up their stats, and some people find this motivating. Problem is though, I think this only really works in the short term, and the issue here is that the motivation is still extrinsic. The training itself is not motivating and rewarding. You're training for an external goal, and if you're willing to level up the stats of a fake avatar, wouldn't you be more willing to level up your own stats? So to me, the key is to make your actual training fun, turn the actual training into the game itself. So the problem with a lot of training is that it's so rote and repetitious, and it doesn't require any focus whatsoever. It's not cognitively engaging. And here's the difference. It's like with work. You get work that is like zombie work, answering emails, sending messages. These are things you can do with your brain switched off, versus creative work that engages you consciously, that you need to focus on. That's what's engaging, that's what keeps you focused, and that's what you need in your training. And that's why something like sparring, like rock climbing, like hand balancing even, can be so much more engaging than standing on the spot and just curling. Partly, this is about the density of information coming into your brain. And information doesn't have to mean numbers and letters, it can mean things like gradients and angles and speeds. This is why trail running, for example, where you're running on uneven ground, finding new routes, jumping over crags and gaps, this is so much more engaging, so much more interesting, and so good for your brain, compared with running in a straight line on a treadmill that's completely flat. There are many other ways you can create a more sensory-rich training experience. For example, doing pull-ups from tree branches or throwing logs, rather than using the perfect flat and round bars at the gym. So how can you implement this in your regular workouts? Well, obviously you need to introduce more variables, whether that means being on a balance board, which you're not going to do with heavy weights, but it has a time and a place, whether it means training at an unusual angle, using something like a lizard crawl. And that brings us to the next thing that's really important for staying cognitively engaged in your training, and that is novelty. So you see this when you play with a cat with a laser pen. Move the laser around the floor and the cat will show some interest, but it'll go wild when you suddenly speed it up or stop the movement entirely. The reason for this is that the brain loves making predictions, and as it tracks an object, which is something that we've evolved to do, it will try and predict where it's going to move. When it gets this wrong, this is called prediction error, and that's what activates a part of the brain called the substantia nigra. This, as it happens, is the starting point of many dopamine pathways in the brain. So in other words, novelty and things that you can't predict send the brain wild with dopamine. This is why sparring's great, because you can't predict the movements of a partner. This is why sports are great, because all the other people on that pitch, you don't know what they're going to do. And it's why curling a weight, once again, isn't very engaging, because you're doing the exact same thing over and over again with no variation whatsoever. There are lots of ways, once again, that we can implement this into our training. With the trail running we've seen, you're exploring new areas. And each time you find a new area, you're flooding it with neuroplasticity producing neurotransmitters. What this basically amounts to is learning. The brain is built for learning. A lot of people think of learning as boring because they associate it with sitting in a classroom, but playing computer games or learning new moves, this is learning as it was intended, with an immediate feedback loop. And this is one of the things that's important. It's something that game designers build into their games in order to make them addictive. Each time you try, you get an immediate reward or an immediate fail state. And this is one of the issues, again, with a lot of conventional training, is you don't get that feedback loop. You're just repeating the same movement over and over. However, if you perform a new movement, or if you really focus on the technique, even on something more basic, more fundamental, then you can get that instant gratification. So practicing calisthenics, for instance, as you try and do a handstand, each time you fail, you get that incentive to try again, and each time you manage to hold it for a while, you get a flood of neurotransmitters to reward you for that success. And this is why I personally find hand balancing and calisthenics to be such an enjoyable way to train. But you can get the same effect from something like powerlifting, whether it's a squat, whether it's a deadlift. Don't just go through the motions, focus on the motions, on perfecting the technique and really playing with them. And as you do, you'll find it becomes much more rewarding and much more addictive as well. With this though, there is a kind of Goldilocks zone. There's a point of difficulty that's ideal for keeping you in a flow state. Again, this is something that game designers know well. You need to make sure that the game is difficult, but not too hard. If it's too easy, it's boring. If it's too difficult, then it doesn't offer enough challenge and it's not stimulating. Same with your exercise. Make sure that you are trying hard. Don't just go through the motions, but at the same time, don't push yourself too far before you're ready. Stay in that Goldilocks zone and you'll stay in a flow state. Jumping rope really is a perfectly gamified and implicitly motivating form of training for so many reasons. For starters, you get that immediate feedback loop. If you make a small mistake, then you're going to stop skipping right away. You want to have another go and see if you can do it better. At the same time, it's really easy to get into a really satisfying flow state. And you're in a constant state of learning. Not only is you're learning new skills, which is really fun and rewarding, but even just the basic skip, you'll learn to skip faster with fewer mistakes. And this, again, is really motivating. It's the kind of thing you don't want to stop doing. And all the while, you're getting fitter and stronger. Today, once again, I'm sponsored by Rote, who, in my opinion, make the very best jump ropes out there. They're incredibly well made. But today, I'm here to talk about something even more interesting. These are their AMP handles, or AMP handles. Basically, they connect to the Crossrope app via Bluetooth, and then this allows them to track your performance. Not only counting your jumps as you're skipping, but also giving you a breakdown of your performance afterwards. You can see your average speed, for example, and you can see your power output, and you can see how you're performing over time and improving. And once again, this is going to give you an additional motivation, not only in the moment as you're able to follow along with the guided workouts, of which there are over 2,000, but also over time as you see yourself gradually improving. Depending on how you perform, the workout's then also personalized to your level. And this again is perfect for keeping you in that flow state, for making sure that the difficulty remains absolutely spot on. There's also a 60-day trial period, so give it a go. If you don't get on with it, you can send it back, no questions asked. And if you use the link in the description down below and enter the promo code BIONEER, then you'll also get 15% off of your purchase. So yeah, check it out. And a massive thanks once again to Crossrope, perfect example of what we're talking about today. Another thing that game designers will use in order to make their games more compelling and interesting is the rule of cool. And this is what it sounds like. If something's cool, then you should do it. And I think this should massively apply to your training. I come to places like this, I film myself crawling around in a VR headset in town, and people might think that guy looks like a bit of a knob. But what I'm really trying to do is create a cool visual. I'm trying to make it interesting. And this applies during training as well. Sometimes I don't do that, but I'll do things like drop out of pull-ups and things just for my own amusement, because if something looks cool and it feels cool, then it's just more exciting and engaging to do. You know, playing Metal Gear Rising and taking down a bad guy jumping from missile to missile. We can't emulate that quite, but we can certainly do more interesting things, whether it's climbing a tree or doing lizard crawls or doing push-ups in the rain. It's just far more exciting and interesting. And another thing to consider is incorporating an element of self-expression, because self-expression and the freedom of choice is also really important for doing something creative that's really going to be rewarding. So don't go through rote movements, throw in a little bit of ad-libbing as well. Another simpler option is to put on some music. The right music makes everything more awesome. So to summarise, if you keep trying new things, if you make sure there's lots of information, lots of stimulation, if you keep learning and keep the challenge right, if you allow for self-expression and make sure that you follow the rule of cool, then you can ensure that the training itself is intrinsically motivating, that it's addictive, that you can't wait to get back in the gym and train some more. When you accomplish that, then the gains will come. So I hope you found this video useful and interesting, guys. If you did, then please leave a like and share it around. That helps me out immensely. Thank you so much to Grant Stevens today for filming and demonstrating some moves. Once again, you guys know to visit his channel. I'll leave the link in the description down below. And guys, if you like this kind of training, this kind of wild outdoors training that's more sensory rich, whilst at the same time training the body for more vectors than you could possibly emulate in a more sterile environment, then you might be interested in something new I've got for you. A new print book called Adaptive Training. By the time you watch this, it's either coming out very soon or it's already released. It's from Mango Publishing, the same as my last print book, and this one goes really in depth into why the body is built to adapt to its environment rather than just to respond to training. I actually include a lot of training programs and introduce some new concepts such as black box training. So go and check that out if you're interested. I'd really appreciate it. I'll leave a link to that in the description down below as well. Either way, guys, thank you so much for watching this one, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.